Welcome to the second half of Future Technology Trends for 2025 podcast by CERT's IT Service Solutions. In this episode, John and Oliver continue to discuss their predictions and key watch points for 2025, which include quantum computing, virtual and augmented reality, sustainability in tech, and the future of the IT workforce. Let's pick up where we left off, with Oliver discussing AI implementation. Let's dive into part 2.
There's an analyst that I follow called Benedict Evans, who he does a great job of articulating a lot of this stuff. And one of the things he said quite some time ago was ultimately the implementation and adoption of this stuff will be slowly over time with boring back office systems, with boring governance and lots of boring consultancies. And I saw a stat that showed that I think OpenAI made something like $3.5 billion revenue, and Accenture's Gen AI consulting business was about 3.6 billion. So Accenture made almost more, if not more, than OpenAI in revenue of generative AI.
Wow. This is the amazing thing about software is how it creates value.
Yeah.
You know, it's written one. It's like the car that you buy. You spend whatever it is on the new car, so that pushes that much money into someone's economy. Then there's the using the car to run a business, and you couldn't create the value in the business without the car. You know what I mean? This kind of economic value of software is unbelievable. I mean, imagine the economic value that's been driven off of Excel.
Oh,
But do you see what I mean? It's this sort of, this is what I think is incredible about the business we're in, is how a bit of software can just turn into this tool that suddenly produces exponential value everywhere.
how would you describe that curve? So if we've been in the sort of, there's obviously a hype cycle, but there's kind of is that the beginning of a bigger maturity cycle where you see the initial excitement and then you get into the long, boring implementation of this stuff into businesses and enterprises? And I wonder if that's the phase that we're entering into.
Yeah, cool. Are you ready for some Black Swan?
Hit me.
Okay, so this is 2 minutes, and it's the first time I've mentioned the word quantum. So you know, we're covering all the classics. So I read somewhere, Ollie, that certain nefarious nation states have been acquiring sort of very significantly encrypted data.
Yep.
In the full knowledge that they can't read it today, but they're doing it with a quantum will arrive one day. And when that arrives, all of these, you know, puzzle boxes that we've stolen will be able to open and look therein. You know, but that's a pretty major event. From a quantum side, just to declare my interests, I've got a couple of children who are doing, well, they're not children anymore, but they're studying physics, and one of them, who's in his 4th year now, is getting approached for quantum type roles, you know, quantum computing.
Yeah,
I mean, like really like genuine jobs that are to do with sorting out quantum computing. So I'm just, you know, that's obviously anecdotal, but I'm sort of seeing that at one end, and I'm thinking about what that could do. I mean, obviously, at some point we can add quantum fusion and AI together, and then we're just sort of off to the races. But I had a look. I tried to see who's investing in quantum, and I used obviously a chat interface to find that out. But there weren't as many as I thought, or at least it looks like a lot of private companies are investing in quantum. You can't see very many public ones. I'm not talking about investment advice. I was just curious as to who's getting into it or not. But do you have a view on that, or do you think that's 26, 27? It's not 25.
In terms of the companies that are involved, isn't it sort of Google, IBM? I mean, my sense is quantum is not for the faint-hearted in terms of you need significant capital investment to get into that and not be expecting to get any return on that for a decade. My understanding from what I've read is there are about 50 working quantum computers at the moment, But and whilst they are increasing in the qubit capacity, their error rate is still very high. So they're very much still in R&D. The view is that they'll start to come live or be operational in some form by around 2029. So we're probably about 5 years away. I think if memory serves, you can go onto Google and you can apply for access to put some for timer on a quantum computer through Google Cloud. But I assume it's for just experimentation.
I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd do some really lame 1+1.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, incredible. That's a lot faster than my calculator.
Exactly.
Well done.
Exactly.
Yeah, well worth it.
And I guess it's a bit like AI in the sense of, or cloud, or any of these other, or nuclear power, any of these other new infrastructure components that become available. How do you deploy it? What is it for?
So the way I think about quantum is we've got longer to think about it, which is a really good thing, because when it arrives, it's going to absolutely just throw us sideways. Because I'm imagining a data set that is petabytes in size, and I'm imagining quantum connected to AI that can just in seconds determine patterns and basically just eat that entire data set pretty much in real time, which is sort of unimaginable at the moment. But what does that mean? That means understanding the weather in near real time. Well, so I suppose is also, if you want to understand the weather in real time, just stand outside. That's a thing, I suppose. But do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't get. I think trying to predict when is a bit of a fool's game, because it could be like the DNA sequencing. They said, oh, it's going to take 100 years, and he said, no, it's doubling every year. It will take us 14 years, and it took 12, and whatever. But it's just more to do with just it is a paradigm change in what we're able to compute. And then the other element of it is they talk about some of the advanced technologies that we're going to get to when we wouldn't be able to get to them without using some AI in the design process. It might just mean, how we're looking through different variations of, chemical engineering, different compounds, and the stuff, it can just churn out and then says, oh, this looks like it could work. That's, that sort of thing. I'm not aware of anything that's going to hit the streets in 2025, but I do think it's a very big step when we get there, and it might be a huge force of good. But like any tool, could also be used to unencrypt everything and stop banking working and all that sort of stuff that you hear.
A few thoughts on that. From a personal professional perspective, I suppose we're probably entering into the period where we would at least want to have quantum on the risk register, even though we know realistically we're half a decade away from any practical implications, but at least having it on the horizon. And then I guess it's separating application of the technology from the implications of the technology. Application, my limited view would be, what are the problems that are constrained by compute? So those constraints are in the areas of, and this is not exclusive to, processing of artificial intelligence models, drug sequencing, material science, encryption. That's the big one, isn't it? And so is there a massive unlock you get from having that capability? So what are the biggest large language models constrained by data and compute? So if we were to remove one of those constraints, would we get new capability from that? I think on the implication side, it's a race, isn't it? It's a massive security race, because whoever gets quantum working first then has the potential to unlock, as you say, those massive troves of data, decrypt data in real time.
Ollie, they might also not want to tell folks that they've unlocked it.
I mean, exactly.
Part of your kind of cyber playbook is to not reveal certain technologies unless it's to your advantage. But I don't want to start any conspiracy theories going. It's not that kind of not that kind of discussion.
Yeah. So I think that's a fascinating one to watch, and I suppose the argument would be, if you've got quantum to decrypt data, then you've got quantum to encrypt data as well.
Yeah. So I've got three others, I think, which would be good to discuss, and not necessarily the same time for each one. But I was going to talk a bit about extended reality, augmented reality, a little bit on what it means for the technologist, the teams that we lead,
Yep.
how are they going to develop and prepare themselves for 25,
Yep.
and then a bit on sustainability
Okay.
as well. So just quickly on the augmented reality. Okay, just from a personal perspective, yeah, I've not bought any goggles.
Right.
I occasionally, see something on a website and press the button so I can see what it looks like in the room, but it's still a bit of a novelty.
Yeah.
I know that's augmented. And I don't spend large amounts of time, having taken the red pill or the blue pill, I can't remember, from the Matrix, and just sort of exist in some sort of alternative online community. So, Ollie, the question is, am I a complete Luddite? Am I missing the augmented reality? Do you think there's a space for it in business tech? Do you think this is, what's our view on that?
My instinct, I'm bearish when it comes to AI. I think it is undoubtedly an amazing experience, and people that use the Apple Vision Pro are uh, they think it's unbelievable. But are they going back
Yeah.
to it and using it every day? And I guess the question is, does it either A, give you some amazing new capability that allows you to become much more successful professionally, or B, make you more attractive to a potential mate? And I think probably the answer to both those questions is no. So it strikes me that it's
Well, speak for yourself, Ollie. No, I'm only joking. I'm joking,
I,
mate.
I mean,
Yeah.
Apple. It came out this week that the suppliers in the supply chain for the Apple Vision Pro have been told to expect reduced demand. So, and that's Apple trying to crack it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, isn't it? Because we had Google Glasses. I know that that's different. Whenever that was, what was that in the noughties, wasn't it?
That's about
and I
15 years ago.
so wanted a pair, but I couldn't get on the list or whatever. And obviously that's, and there's talk of other types of glasses. I'm wondering if there is you might have one of these cars. I don't actually have a car at the moment, but I've seen folks that have like a head-up display.
Yeah.
They have this sort of, it projects into you can see how fast you're going by looking at the bonnet of your car. That I know that's not, is that really augmented reality? I'm not sure.
No.
But I'm just wondering whether there's anything around the edges of that tech that is going to become mainstream and could be of interest to the business technologist.
There's a bit of B2B, isn't there, for certain applications in the engineering industry. But ultimately, we had 2-3 years of pretty exclusive remote working as a result of COVID. And we all chose to come back broadly to the office one way or another. So we still have, we're using video conferencing right now. So it's become part of the way businesses work. But fundamentally, when we need to come together for conferences or offsites or events, we're not going to do that in virtual reality. I just don't think we are.
So do you think if there is another pandemic, that could drive adoption in a different way for that kind of reason? It's difficult to remember. It's sort of, I can remember what the pandemic was like, and there were moments where the isolation was quite kind of deafening. Yeah, it just being in your house sort of thing. So I'm wondering whether the augmented reality was sort of coming off of the back of that a little bit, and then it's not. So. Do you think that's what happened?
What's your view? You asked me mine. Are you bullish or bearish?
Yeah, I'm very, very much in your camp with that. I think I reckon I would love to use it in a airport lounge, but I'd probably be very, very self-conscious of everyone looking over. Yeah. And also I'm just thinking of it cracking and charging it. It's another device to charge up. Yeah. And also I actually think it's outrageously expensive. Yeah. So I'm not up for making a statement about, I love tech, but I don't want tech to be a statement like a posh watch or I much rather the tech that you can't tell you're using it. So I think if they shrunk it down and get back to my quantum hobby horse, and it had a tiny little fusion quantum device and everything else, and it jacked straight into your brain, so you could it was projecting through your eyeballs, then maybe I would be up for that.
Oh yeah, that would be brilliant.
I can see quite a few problems with that as well. Yeah. Just to say, okay. So we're going to do sustainability, workforce transformation. Maybe we do workforce transformation at the end, because I mean that's the bit about what does it mean to us and our teams, and where do our skills go. But let's just do a bit on sustainability. So I read recently. So I'm into kind of the software that gives you end user experience. The sort of experience scores.
Mm-hmm.
Used it for quite a few years, and one of the things it does for me is it gives me some sustainability metrics coming out of the estate. CO2 consumed, that sort of thing. One thing I discovered, which I absolutely had no idea, is that generally speaking, the laptop consumption is much, much bigger than the data center consumption. And I
Yeah, how
absolutely
interesting.
thought it would be the other way around. But I'm not talking about what we've been looking at. That's an observation from that company about all companies. So the CO2 sort of the emissions part of it is much more prevalent on the sort of the laptop estate than it is on the data center. There's a few reasons for that. One is from their analysis, and not everyone's going to personally think, well, I've not experienced this, but on their analysis, a lot of companies replace machines too frequently, which I've never heard anyone tell me you're replacing these machines too frequently. But actually, if you look at the underlying metrics, there's a lot of machines that are, can still do it, but maybe they look tired, or they've got bloated software, or we're doing something to make it faster, but we don't realize the underlying device is still okay. And so that impact I'm talking about, Ollie, isn't just the use of power, because obviously if you're on older operating systems, they're not as efficient. But then if you're on the modern ones, maybe you're using more compute. Because I'm about to hire someone to be purely looking at tech footprint.
Interesting.
Because I looked at it, I thought, my goodness, this is actually a really big topic. And there's a bit of a trade-off, isn't there, between the fact that you and I haven't had to travel to meet, but then again, we're using the streaming, which is et cetera. So my prediction for 2025 is that all of us are going to need to get far more up close and personal about the planet and sustainability in tech. And I don't just mean it in the simple way, we provide laptops, they use electricity. I mean also where technology can actually prevent or reduce expenditure or impact elsewhere.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting on that point. You're right. We've never had a case of people saying, "Don't take my laptop. This is good enough." Interestingly, on the phones we have, so we've used iPhones for like most organisations, and actually the desire to swap those out, we're not seeing that as much, because I guess ultimately the devices aren't improving. The personal cost of the swap is more than the benefit of a new phone, which is quite interesting. I think we're into that stage.
Yeah.
And so we've rethought our approach to deploying those to respond to that. In terms of the cost, I guess the big one, isn't it? I'm reminded of those YouTube videos, the ugly truth, the dirty secret. The ugly truth about AI is the amount of energy taken to process and run these models is vast. And so we are probably in a Moore's law cycle where the need to get efficiency out of the models is critical. It's interesting, isn't it? The models have come out of the research labs, and now the engineers are working on them. So whilst they might not be getting better in one way, they're becoming more efficient. Now the engineers are working on them.
Yeah, and I know that you've got a strong connection to a platform, Jilo, that
So we
has
customers of
the
Jilo,
ability to pick different models, and the cost of the model probably. Well, I'm assuming the cost might also equate to its compute or carbon footprint, or maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I think the analogy I would use. Sorry everyone that we've got back into AI. The sort of the laziness that you can get with a prompt.
Yeah.
And actually, I've seen some of the prompts that people use, and it's unbelievable. In fact, there is a way of getting Copilot to do a summary with you without using a prompt. There is sort of the laziest prompt you can possibly imagine. But what I would rather people do is develop a more thoughtful prompt and do that once, than to do, summarize with this, now do that. That iteration that we're getting within prompting is probably a huge opportunity for improvement in terms of power consumption, etc.
Well, I would hazard a guess that in Outlook, that summarize button, the prompt that's underneath that is actioning not GPT 4.0, but probably 5.3. They're much smaller model horses for courses.
Yes, yeah,
But on the energy required to power all of this stuff, there is a lot in the news about the move to nuclear. So
yeah,
the investments being made by big tech in nuclear energy, I think that is a theme to watch out for in the next year or two. The
yeah,
decarbonisation of the grid is not going to happen through wind
yeah.
and solar alone. It's going to require a base load of nuclear energy, and I think that's going to be a big part of the picture.
Ollie, we used to tell an analogy which was all about being famous for the right things. And the analogy was about breweries in the, I don't know, I'm going to say 19th century. Yeah. And when they started getting bigger, they needed more electricity. So they generated their own electricity on site because there wasn't a grid. So, and then the really successful breweries then adopted the grid when it arrived. And the ones that went the way of the dinosaurs were the ones that carried on trying to produce their own electricity. And the takeaway story for all of that is about, make sure you're famous for something, and, focus on your core. But actually what you've just said is the modern, the brewery equivalent now is the tech company. They're running all these data centers on behalf of everyone else, and they're now having to get private electricity, nuclear. So we're kind of going full circle. And I think it's really interesting that you look at the capacity of the grid in the UK or anywhere, and then you add to it the kind of projected growth of compute and all the rest of it. Plus the fact, I think it's widely accepted that the UK power grid's got some real challenges, in terms of getting the final mile and getting power generated and distributed efficiently everywhere. So actually, if we're talking operational resilience, or ops res, as I've heard it called, for 2025, could power be an issue in terms of securing it, or being able to cover off a challenge around power?
Well, I listened to a talk by Greg Jackson this week, who's the CEO of Octopus Energy, and it was fascinating what he was saying about the current pricing structure or framework in the UK is counterintuitive to how you would want to develop the grid, because it has a flat pricing structure. So you might have loads of wind energy being generated in Scotland, but no demand, and loads of demand down in the UK where it's grey and no wind. And that is
that'd be North Yorkshire.
Yeah. and that is what is driving an expensive unit price for electricity. And what you want to be able to do is to vary the price as to where it's cheap, and it is abundantly cheaper in Scotland the vast majority of the time. If you were to have regional pricing, you could then incentivize data centers to be built in those regions where they could purchase based on low cost energy, because that is the biggest factor that is driving investment in data centers, is where you can get the power the cheapest.
Early doors, because both of us have had data centers, and some of us still have data centers that we look after. Power's always been the major component of the total price, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we worked together once, and there was a massive power outage, wasn't there, in the primary data center of the company that we were working for, and then we suddenly realized every service that was running out of that data center.
Okay, well, look, I don't want to leave people to the very end, given that we've only got sort of 4 minutes or so. But what just start us off on a thought of what does this all mean for our teams? If you're just joining or thinking of coming into technology, or you're established in a technology role, what are the sort of thoughts for those folks? What they should be, if you were advising someone and said, look, learn this, whatever you do, just learn this, get into this, or get out of tech, or get into tech, or move more into, what would your advice be? There's a lot that we've got coming at us, but if you were to sort of think about where the workforce needs to pivot into, what would you say?
I think the first thing I say is that a career in technology can be hugely fulfilling and with immense variety, and it can take you to lots of places that you wouldn't imagine. And so technology will be a fundamental part of any business that you get the chance to be exposed to a whole myriad of different worlds of work. So I still think it's a really compelling career choice.
Yeah,
Some advice
agree.
I think is be as passionate as you can about it. Be genuinely interested in it, because it is moving so fast that if you are only learning about technology during your working hours, then you are going to limit yourself to how much you can assimilate. And so having a genuine interest where you are learning and reading about this stuff constantly is so critical, because it will help you to understand the difference between clickbait headlines and real technology innovation, and then how that could translates into the business in which you operate. And I think that's really important, because as a technologist, there's nothing worse than when you're speaking to someone who's just regurgitating buzzwords at you without understanding all of the implications and the stack of things
Yeah,
that's happened. So just, I think being passionate about it, the most successful people, I think, are those that are genuinely passionate about what they do.
yeah, and authentic. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree with you, Ollie. Well, as they say, that's all we've got time for, folks, for this episode. I just want to say, Ollie, as always, fantastically interesting talking to you. Love your perspective, and I'm sure if we generate some questions or whatever, we'll get those over to you. But just a huge pleasure and honor to talk to you this afternoon, and thanks very much for giving us your time. And you time stamped it by mentioning the budget. So it'll be very, very interesting. What that
Mm.
puts this podcast on a particular milestone as well.
It does.
So yeah, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to chat.